My interaction with Monica began strictly in the context of flow and our respective professions. But over time, it has blossomed into a deep friendship based on mutual trust and respect. Our telephonic exchanges have at times stretched over hours without moving into anything personal. During her tenure as chairperson, I served the organization in the capacity of treasurer. Her very strong background in finance and management helped me acquire an overall picture of the commercial aspects and do's and don'ts with regard to flow. I noticed then the unique blend of quiet discipline and aggressive achievement in her approach. I have a memory with her on my personal front. She is fit as fiddle. I remember we had traveled to Cherrapunji on a flow retreat and visited the underground caves there. The cave system was very damp, watery, and narrow with stalactites and stalagmites. We had to literally crawl on our fours to get to the other side. By the time I could even get my wits together, Monica had crawled across and waving to me to get a move on. Needless to say, I was stuck there for a long time. It was then I realized not only her fitness levels, but also the fact that she is younger to me by years. Her emotional and mental maturity never made me realize that earlier. And now let's start our main session with Monica Agarwal. Monica, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So, Monica, let's start with something most of us don't know about you. Last year, you were on the Everest Base Camp trek. Tell us about it. What prompted you to do the trek? And what kind of mental and physical preparation did it take? Have you always been an adventurous person?
I've always loved nature, and usually my vacations are also to remote, naturally beautiful places. And I enjoy adventure activities. But before taking up the EBC trek, my idea of a workout was a 45-minute leisure walk. I had never done strength training before, so I was far from fit for taking up a rigorous trek. I went for this trek with two of my cousin sisters, both younger and fitter. One of them does triathlons. So when they called me up and said, let's do this trek, Zindagi na milegi dobara. I thought, let me let me do this trek before I turn 50, and I registered.
Oh.
And then I started working out. A few days later, I checked with the guide and asked him what is the fitness level that I should have. And he said that I should be able to climb 25 floors without panting or gasping for breath with 10 kgs weight. Now that is when reality stuck in. I was cursing myself and my cousins for pulling me into this. But I've always been a go-getter. And so I was not the kind to give up. I started working out for 1 to 2 hours a day. And after a couple of months, I was climbing 50 floors at a stretch and thought I was fit to go. On the first day of the trek itself, I realized how ill prepared I was. When I saw the huge mountains and the path in front of me, it was raining and the path was quite slippery. My immediate thought was, I can't do this. Then I asked myself if I could take one step and then the next and the next and so on. I started living in the moment. I became thankful for each muscle of my body, half of which I didn't know existed before. After 4,000 meters height, the air becomes very thin. Even breathing becomes difficult. And at that time, it became one breath at a time, one step, one breath at a time. It truly became meditation. On my return, when I looked back at the mountains, which I had climbed, it felt like a dream. How did I climb all this way up? It felt unbelievable, but exhilarating.
Okay. That's quite courageous, Monica. Yeah, and even I did Manasarovar trek a couple of years ago, and I know the kind of stamina and focus one needs to turn back when the going gets tough. And I'm sure Everest Base Camp trek must be more challenging. Yeah. Can you share some unforgettable experiences of the trek and maybe life lessons that you learned from those few weeks?
EBC has been a life-changing experience for me, and the learnings which happened on this trek have remained with me, and they constantly drive me today. It was a 12-day trek, and we were walking almost 10 to 12 hours every day. Most of the way was narrow, with mountains on one side and valley on the other side, barely 2 feet wide, and sometimes we had to balance our feet on the rocks. On day one, I would walk near the mountains for fear of falling in the valley. So if Sherpas and yaks or mules carrying load would come, I would stop at a safe spot near the mountainside. On day three, I would give them the better path of the road. The fear had disappeared and compassion had taken its place. Similarly, on day one, I would keep on asking the guide as to how much longer the route was, how much steeper. On day three, I didn't ask. I just surrendered. And I was grateful that the guide was even there. The guides have an amazing system. The junior guide leads the group, followed by the trekkers, and the senior guide comes the last. The idea being that the speed of the trek is determined by the slowest trekker. The junior guide could barely speak, and in the beginning, I used to be in the front, and I had lots of questions about the trek, about the mountains, and this guy could hardly reply to any of them. And I wondered why he was in the front. Shouldn't the one leading the group be the best? On day four, I was very sick and I could barely walk. Obviously, I was the last in the line, followed by the senior guy. I wanted to leave the trek, go back to the comfort of the home. He motivated me into continuing the trek, carrying my backpack, holding my hand at each difficult step, offering water and chocolates, and telling me stories about the mountains. And then I wondered if I was that kind of a leader at work, motivating and helping my staff when they were. Was I a caring parent, and would my kids come to me not at their peak state, but when they were their best? Another learning was I'm alone in this journey. The guide was there to help me, motivate me, but nobody could take the steps for me. I had to walk my path. Others could help me, motivate me, but it was for me to walk. Initially, I had thought that the 12-day of trek would become boring, same mountains, same route every day. But it was amazing how each day felt so different. Each day taught me a new lesson. Each day had something new to soak in. I was working on different muscles every day, different mind situations. And I realized mental fitness plays a bigger role than physical fitness.
Yeah. I mean, the solitude and nature both have their own healing benefits. You're you're muted. No, we are not able to hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
yeah, I can hear you. Okay. And of course, when they are done together, the results are truly amazing. And even the science also proved that. And I know once is not enough for you. You may be planning the next trip already.
Absolutely. I've been waiting for this situation to improve. We had planned a trek in February, but then obviously that couldn't happen. And we're just waiting, all three of us, we're
Okay.
just waiting to go back again to the nature and the mountains.
That's, I know, I can understand. I mean, you are becoming very emotional. How, I mean, the impact of that trek on you. Yeah. Okay. And my next question is take us down memory lane, Monica. Where are you from, and what were your dreams and aspirations while growing up? And yeah,
I had a very conservative upbringing. My dad was a High Court judge. He was in the Supreme Court at Delhi also for a few years. He was a very hardworking person who had built his career with his perseverance. So he's always been a role model for me. My mom is a very simple lady. I was a good student and would study all the time. So my parents always told me not to study so much as I would be married at 18 and would have to look after the house. That made me a rebel. And I would work doubly hard to excel at studies and extracurricular activities at school. Since I was good at studies, my teachers and my friends assumed that I would become an IAS officer. But I was very clear by the time I was 15 years old. I wanted to do my own business because I wanted to be on my own. I wanted to be independent. Procedures, rules, paperwork was not for me. Since I didn't have a clue on how to do business, I thought doing an MBA was the first step. And I started working hard.
So then you went on to do your MBA. Where did you do your MBA? And tell us briefly about that experience.
Yeah. So in my MBA, I was the youngest and the most inexperienced kid of the batch.
Okay.
Everyone else had 2, 5, or 10 years experience. I had been selected because of my marks in the entrance and my gold medal in the BSc. But since the course was application based, I was a disaster in class. Initially, I was overwhelmed and overawed. But then soon I realized there was so much to learn from all my batchmates. Each one of them knew something which I didn't, and I was ready to listen, understand, and absorb.
The kind of, clarity you seem to have since your childhood is quite rare, I must say. And also, your parents allowed you to follow your heart is quite commendable.
Yeah, I think they hadn't allowed willingly, but as I said, I was always a rebel. So kind of they had to agree to me.
You okay?
Yeah.
So, did you straight away start your own business, or did you start off a job and when did marriage come into the picture?
I met Jitendra while doing my internship at Aisha Motors. We both had similar dreams, same value systems in life. So we got married in a couple of years. And after my marriage, I started working as an investment banker with Kotak Mahindra. I worked there for about 5 years. Though I was earning very well, getting my incentives, promotions, foreign vacations, and so on, but it wasn't fulfilling. I wanted to be on my own, do things my way, achieve the results, have my own business. By then, my daughter was born, and the high flying job left me with hardly any time to spend with her. One day, when I came back home from work, she was about a year old at that time, and she wouldn't leave the nanny and come to me. That day, I sent in my resignation. It was time for me to set my priorities right. We moved back to Hyderabad, and in a couple of months, we opened our first retail furnishings store.
Oh, that's a huge leap of faith. And but then whatever may have spurred the decision of your resignation, it was the first step in the direction of your dream becoming an entrepreneur. Sometimes all it takes is one just small nudge.
But I had nurtured this dream from years. So it was easy for me to have that conviction to take that leap of faith when I had.
So, what was the reason behind entering the furnishing segment? And did you face any challenges both on your personal front and professional?
Both me and my husband wanted to start our own business, but we didn't have the capital to start manufacturing. So we thought trading was the next best option. In Hyderabad, my mother in law was running a small retail showroom since long, and she had a good, loyal customer base. So that was a definite strength. And in Delhi, while doing up our house, we had seen Jagdish stores and a few other big furnishing showrooms. Hyderabad in 1999 did not have any big furnishing store. Hence, we thought that was a good opportunity. There would be a good market for soft furnishings, and we could cater to it. So we opened our first furnishing showroom. A few years later, we opened the second furnishings showroom. Thereafter, we moved into all India distribution. Today, we have over 700 dealers spread all over India. Challenges, yes, work-life balance and setting my priorities was always a challenge. When the kids were young and growing up, if they were home and I was at work, I would feel guilty and myself. Whenever I was faced with a dilemma, I always asked myself, what is most important to me in the long run? And then I made my choice. I think that made the process easier.
I must congratulate you, Monica, on making Jai Durga a pan-India brand in 20 years.
Thank you.
Yeah. And for most Hyderabadis, it is the preferred destination for tasteful furnishings.
Thank you so much.
I know you look after finance and you have undertaken construction of your projects. Normally, these are male-dominated areas. And did you ever feel discriminated against?
Yes, there were times when people, be it the income tax officials, sales tax officials, or construction suppliers, they would walk in my office and ask if they could talk to sir. Now, but once I started speaking and they understood I had subject knowledge, acceptance came in quickly. So I believe it's not the gender, but a person's capability, work, and passion which brings in success.
Yeah. Yeah, this is actually a very valuable point, and I completely agree with you about expertise and experience putting any doubts to rest. And very unfortunately, gender bias and glass ceilings continue to hold back women from achieving their true potential.
I think it's more in the mind.
Yeah. And I and most everybody here knows you through Flow. So tell us about your journey with Flow. Let's start with who or what made you to join this organization.
I used to go to a gym where I met Miss Hina Srivastav, the then current chair.
Okay.
She asked me to join Flow, and I thought it was a good idea to meet other entrepreneurs and businesswomen. So I joined Flow in 2004. I always felt listening to pioneers in the field helped me in aiming for higher goals, understand how to plan to achieve those goals. And today, when I look back, there was a take back in each and every program that I have attended. Something which I have learned either from the speaker or the moderator, committee member, or a flow member.
Yeah. Which was the first post you held in the executive committee?
I always wanted to learn and understand different aspects of life from my seniors. So when an opportunity came up, Ms. Hina Srivastav again asked me to join as a treasurer. I agreed. Finance was anyway my comfort zone, so it was easy. Being on the committee made me learn a lot of things. At that time, Ms. Sarita Reddy was the chairperson, and there was a lot I learned from her, especially her humbleness and her down-to-earth demeanor.
Yeah, that's nice to see memories, Monica. Good. And then you went on to be the secretary and then chairperson. Can you? I mean, how it happened?
I wasn't keen on becoming the secretary, as I thought that was out of my comfort zone. However, Ms. Pinky Reddy, who was the chairperson at that time, somehow convinced me into taking it up.
Okay.
And I feel that was a turning point for me. There was so much to learn and understand. Planning for programs, coordinating with speakers brought in a lot of confidence and maturity. I made some great friends for life. I'm sharing this platform today with two of them, Usha and Rekha. Again, I was quite skeptical about taking up the chairpersonship. But then a couple of friends, Maurya Bodha, Mansi Malik, Priyanka Ganeriwal, convinced me into taking this up. This leadership role gave me a lot of self-confidence and built courage in me to dream bigger and plan to execute those dreams. Initially, I thought talking to speakers and convincing them to come for programs would be a Herculean task. I'm sure you're going through it today, Usha. But then one speaker at a time, one call, one email, and the process set rolling.
That's quite a journey. You're very active now. You're very active in the past Chairs Council too. And how has the quality of your contribution changed over the years?
Yes, I was a finance mentor and then a convener. in RGS Council. Being a finance mentor was my comfort zone. So I helped in bringing in processes and systems. In being a mentor, we start giving back to the organization, motivating and preparing the future leaders. Being a convener again brought in a lot of maturity, a lot of objectiveness, understanding, and focus on the larger picture. Coordination with the other chairpersons, each of them leaders in their own field, but working together as a team for the larger objectives of the organization, brought in humility.
Yeah, we have seen you grow over the years into metamorphose into a butterfly, so to say. Tell us about the transformative journey and what you think have been the most important reasons for your success.
A lot of hard work, proper planning, and organizing, a constant urge to learn and improve, and of course, God's grace. Being a part of Flow, where I had the privilege of interacting with inspiring women who had achieved a lot in life, gave me the confidence to dream bigger, take risks, and connect with people from different walks of life. Apart from Flow, both my kids have always kept me on my toes, prodding me to do better, be better. I always wanted to do the best for them, understand them, motivate them, make them better human beings. This made me read books on self improvement, motivation, parenting. I'm a part of book reading sessions by Miss Lakshmi Yarlagadda, who has inspired me into a continuous process of introspection and meditation. For years, I had not been regular with my meditation and even exercise, but EBC brought in that discipline. Today, exercise and meditation are a part of my daily routine.
So, finally, what's the one message you would like to give to our members?
Keep growing and learning. Become a better version of yourself every day. Whatever it is that you are doing today, whether a leader, an entrepreneur, a homemaker, a parent, a friend, be better than you were yesterday. And you would always feel on top of the world.
Thank you, Monica, for giving us a glimpse into your life and what makes you to the go-to person for family, friends, and colleagues.
I would like to thank you and Team Flow for giving me this opportunity. I feel really privileged and honored to share my humble journey.
It's a pleasure for us, Monica, to know about you. And actually, your perseverance and diligence are accompanied by a willingness to help and the generosity to see others grow. And this is your best attribute. And
Thank
of
you.
course, I'm a living example for that. I know how many hours I spoke to you, and
It's been a privilege for me as well to see you really shine so much this year.
thank you. Thanks again.